Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Christina Lenkowski. Hi, Christina.
Hello, Adi. I'm so excited to be here in front of your audience of my fellow founders and business owners. It's going to be a great conversation today.
Absolutely. It's going to be an amazing conversation. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects. Well, my favorite subject is called processes and procedures. We're going to talk about podcasting, which is also a favorite subject of mine. As you know, I've been doing it for like 4 years now, 500 episodes, very exciting.
Amazing.
I love to talk to guests, and we're going to talk about the power of podcasts and publicizing a podcast, being on a podcast. So, but first of all, let me go over your bio so the listeners know who they're listening to. So you are a forward-thinking podcast publicist. I love forward thinking. That's always very important. An educator for business owners, speakers, and authors looking to expand their credibility and go from best kept secret to go-to expert in their industries through being a guest on other people's podcasts. So that's incredible. And in 2019, after 13 years working in the PR world, you discovered what being a guest on a podcast did for your online-based business. Since then, you dedicated your work for helping other business owners, particularly women, see the same kind of results. You've been a guest on over 100 podcasts. Well, so did I. So that's amazing, including her Empire Builder, Brand Gravity, and the Heather Sage Show. And you help your private client get booked over 1,000 top-rated shows, including Hello 7, and with Rachel Rogers, Superwoman Wellness, Cubicle to CEO, the Copywriter Club, and Get Paid with Claire, among others. So that's incredible. So well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, it is amazing to think that across that 1,000 podcasts that there have been millions of earbuds, that have heard myself and my clients and all the wisdom and all the thought and all that stuff that's gone out there is pretty amazing to think of the lives impacted.
Sure. So do you have your own podcast, or you just a guest on other people's podcasts?
I do not have my own podcast. I simply guest on other people's shows. Most of my clients are that way. Not everyone is. But I get asked this question a lot. Like, I get asked a lot by people like, should I have my own podcast or should I guest on other people's podcasts? And I think that it's really important to determine what your end goal is, right?
So tell me, how do you differentiate? Because my answer to that will be both. I mean, I enjoy having people on my podcast because I have control who comes on. I have I would not be able to have this amazing conversation if I were, if I didn't have my own podcast. But then also I love being on other people's podcasts because it has its benefits. So tell me, how do you see that? Like what's different? Yeah, go ahead.
I think both, if you have the time and the ability to do it, both is wonderful. But I think for a lot of business owners, it's unrealistic. And so I think it's important to think about what makes the most sense for your time, your effort, your energy, etc. Like, what is that end goal you're looking for? And one thing that you really hit the nail on the head there is when you have your own podcast, you are in control, right? You control the narrative. You control what goes out on your shows, who comes on your shows, etc. And a lot of business owners like to play in that world of control. Okay. So they like to be able to say, I know exactly what I'm going to put out there. I know exactly what this is going to look like, etc. And I think that if you are trying to grow your brand, like if you are really trying to have it so the people that are in your world are getting to know you even better, getting nurtured even more, if that is your main goal, then having your own podcast is a fan freaking tastic way to do that. One thing I want to caution you, and I know Adi, you can back me up on this, is having your own podcast is a lot of work. And I think that this is something to be very upfront about and very honest about, because a lot of people, I think it's going to be a much easier process than it actually ends up being.
And Christina, I just want to say you're absolutely right, 100%. But that's why that's why I have an agency, that's why I use an agency to do that. So a big shout out here to Rise 25, because they identify that and they provide beginning to end white glove service that all you need to do is to start recording, and then
you still come up with content though? Do you still come up with the content, or do they provide you with all that?
They can provide also content if you need to.
Yeah.
But honestly, it is also, they provide, the thing is that in the beginning, so the majority of the work is the beginning. You have to really understand who you are, because you can't just, shoot in the dark. So you do a blueprint session with them and identify who are your ideal guests. Who do you want on the podcast? What are you going to talk about? How are you going to build your podcast? How are you going to do? So they help you through that process. And again, going through the process, once I had that process, it's really not a problem, because I know who I want on my show, and I network a lot. I'm part of entrepreneur organization. I'm part of NABO, the National Association of Women Business Owners. I'm part of this. I mean, I meet people all the time and I go like, wow, I really want to have you on my podcast because I want to talk about this, this, and that. And then it's the same as asking somebody for a coffee, going out to coffee, but it's part of the networking. So because I don't want to derail from it. This is your show. I want to hear about you, but I just want to back you up that it is a lot of work. And if you want to do your own podcast, I wouldn't recommend trying to figure it out yourself. I would recommend hiring somebody like Rise 25, because that makes a huge difference, because being taken care of. The same thing, somebody can say, well, it's hard for me to get to be a guest on other people's podcasts. How do I do that? That's why they hire you, because you have the method. And for them, all they need to do is to show up, because you help them. And we're going to talk about that in terms of, because you also have to have preparation, but then they have somebody like you to help them and guide them and coach them. And that way, the whole idea is that you just show up, whether to record a podcast or to be a guest on a podcast.
And I will say, for me, the coming up with what to talk, because I did have a podcast and I had an agent, I had people helping me, and I really struggled with what I was going to talk about each time. So for me, again, I'm just trying to be upfront about, there's a lot of work involved. It is, you also have to be committed to the consistency, right? You have to be committed to, like, I'm going to be showing up. I'm going to be, however you want to do that, whether that's you recording weekly, whether that's you batching. There are people that batch like months at a time, whatever works for you. But having a podcast is wonderful if you have the ability to do it. Hey, if there weren't people that have podcasts, I wouldn't have a company. So trust me, I'm a big, big fan of podcast hosts.
That's very true. That's very, very true.
100%. So like, you ain't never going to hear me bagging on having your own podcast, right? Like, I think that it's amazing. But I do think a lot of people go into it naively, thinking that it's going to be a really, really simple process. And so just knowing this is going to be a process, just like you said, but there are going to be great things that come out of it. And one of those being really strengthening your brand. But one thing I want to mention is, starting a podcast is not a, if you build it, they will come situation. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people, I think, also, just like they do with books, put out a podcast and just think people are going to magically find said podcast. Okay. That is not really how it goes or how it works. So the other side of this coin is guesting on other people's podcasts.
Right.
And the reason I'm saying this is, you are just showing up and leveraging someone else's audience. So now you don't have control over that show, right? You don't have control over even necessarily what the host is going to ask you, right? A lot of times we don't get a list of questions beforehand. Beforehand, Adi was nice enough to be like, is there anything you want me to touch? I'm like, no, let's go. Like, but that's because I've done this 100+ times, right? But a lot of people get wrapped up in not having that control, and not being able to know ahead of time, well, what exactly we're going to talk about. Honestly, if a host sends me questions, I don't even look at them. I don't, because to me, it is a conversation. I know what I can talk, what I'm an expert at, what I can talk about, et cetera. And quite frankly, most of the time, the conversation never goes the way
Yeah,
that
I
the
mean, like we had a
questions have been laid
conversation right
out.
now. We never even thought about it. I'm going to talk about
Exactly.
advertising, creating your own podcast. I know.
Exactly. So I think that it's like there's a bit of that control thing going on there. But what you get, first of all, I want to be very clear that every single host I've ever worked with, no one is ever out to get me, right? No one is ever out to make you, like, they're not trying to get you with questions, right? They're trying to make the best show that they possibly, can for their audience as well. So I'm not trying to say that in the you don't have control and suddenly something horrible gets aired. Like, no, that's not it. It just means that they are in control of asking those questions. They're in control of kind of that audience and situation and everything like that that's going to go out there. But with that in mind, if your main goal as a business owner is you want to get in front of new people, you want to be getting new leads, you want to be getting new folks understanding what it is that you do, guesting on a podcast is what you want to focus on. Now,
Absolutely.
if you have your own podcast that you can direct people back to, wonderful. Because again, that is going to strengthen that brand work for them. That's going to strengthen that nurturing for them. But again, it's all about what that end goal is. Is the end goal that you want to nurture people in your brand, or is the end goal that you want to get in front of new potential clients, new potential collaborators, new potential audiences? Then you want to be guesting.
Absolutely. So let me ask you a question. I have questions. Okay.
I have answers.
Good. So what are some of the do's and don'ts when you are a guest on the podcast?
So many. I think that I'll focus on the don'ts first. I'll do a couple of those and then we'll move into the do's. A big don't that I would have is don't not listen to an episode of the show before you hop on. A host knows, right? A host is going to be able can tell very quickly if someone has ever looked at their show, ever paid attention to their show. You better believe that I was listening to an episode of this show earlier today so that I would have a basis of who is this audience? Who is it that Audie likes to talk to? What are the main points that she's getting across? And I'm not sitting there taking notes. I'm not doing anything like that, but I'm getting that general idea of what's going on, what the vibe is, et cetera, what she's probably going to start off our conversation with, et cetera, in that way. So come prepared. So when I say like, you're just going to show up, you are just going to show up, but there does need to be some prep work that's being done beforehand to make sure that you are showing up in the best possible light that you can, right? The other thing that I would say as a don't would be don't forget to share this episode, right? Don't forget to promote this episode on the back end. When I talk to hosts, and y'all know I talk to a lot of hosts because this is literally my job. I go to events to talk to hosts, right? I do all this stuff. A lot of people, the biggest pet peeve that I would say podcast hosts have is that they have a guest on and the guest never shares their episode, never talks about this episode that they were on. Now, sometimes maybe that particular guest isn't big on social media. They send it in an e-newsletter. There are things that a host might not know is happening in the background, right? That they don't necessarily have direct access to. Like we do that a lot. We send out the episodes that me and my clients have been in an email, which unless that host was on our list, they wouldn't necessarily see. But as much as possible, you want to be sharing that to your audience as well. That's part of the reason that a host brings someone on their show. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Adi, but I'm
absolutely. And
I'm guessing that's been a thing for you too.
Yes, but one thing that I wanted to add in terms of the mailing list, so we send, like, part of our process is that we also invite our guests to be on our mailing list because we also sending on our mailing list. So let's say this episode here, it's going to go out to all of our mailing lists. So people are going to know about you. So one of the things that I found that is successful is I tell you, okay, Christina, so we have our newsletter that goes out every Monday. We actually also write blog posts on the podcast based on the podcast episode. I mean, we have so many podcast episodes, so we don't do on everything. But if it's any conversation that I think matches also building a process or a system, we'll write a blog. And then we will tell, and we always send the episode as well. And we tell our guests, hey, we're going to add you to the episode. I'm going to add you to our mailing list. And obviously, if you say, no, we're not going to, but feel free to forward that newsletter to whomever you know, because I think that's also good for us, because then somebody will get our newsletter that didn't know about us.
It's not going to hurt. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, exactly.
But for you, you're getting a beautiful piece that we invested, it's like professionally made marketing piece.
Absolutely.
Why not? Why not send it out that, if, let's say it was the opposite and I was on your let's say you had a podcast on your podcast, and you asked me to do that. I said, of course, I'm going to send it to everybody and say, hey, look, I was on this. Here's a
how easy. Yeah.
So I think it's the agreement that the reason why we're doing it is to cross disseminate, cross send out, cross promote. And I think that's awesome, because then you tap into my network, I tap into your network, and it's beautiful. And so I think that is very important. And I'm glad that you said it. It's very important to also listen and do the research about the host to begin with.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's kind of like it's impolite, right? Because then showing up, and I mean, I had guests in the past where we show up, they don't even care about what I do.
Yeah, exactly. Then why do you want to be spending your time with them? You know what I mean? Why do you want to be putting them on your platform, right?
And the whole show is about them, which I will give them the spotlight and ask and be interested.
Yeah.
But I think it has to be there should be reciprocity there, in terms of like, hey, like you came on and go, yeah, I see that you live here and here, and I see this and I see that and I see that, and then we have already that common
bond.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that because we are basically helping each other make each other known. But I also think that it also has to be a very meaningful conversation, because it has to be within the brand. So I like it when just like what you did, like when when a guest comes on and they want to know who is my audience, how can I help you? Because right now we are creating this episode for my audience, and I have audience, I know, and I have my loyal audience, because they give me comments and go, oh, I listened to your podcast with that and that, or that was a wonderful. So I like it when I have a guest that they ask me, well, how can I help you? Like, who's your audience and how can I help you? And I love that question, because we are helping each other, because obviously I help 100%. You to get known, but you're also helping me. Like let's say, for instance, for me, how can you help me? Well, I like to record this podcast so my listeners will learn something new. I just want to do so that, because that's when they're going to keep coming back, learn something new, learn something that, enlighten them on something that they never thought about before, or maybe they thought about it before. It's a different angle. It helps me to generate content, because I learn new things, and then I can think about that and generate content. And of course, it's a piece that we put out there for thought leadership. So that's good. But here's another don't, if we go about the don't, is don't sell. Don't sell on the podcast.
Always the thing I always teach, I love you said that real quick. This is one quick line I always say about that, is like, it is absolutely service over self-promotion. When you are on a show, you are there to, I think a lot of people, that actually calms a lot of people when they hear me say that, because I think they get up in their head about, I don't want to just go on and sell for an hour. That doesn't feel comfortable to me. And I'm like, yo, I don't want you doing that either. You know what I mean? Like, that host doesn't want you doing that. I don't want you doing that. Like, you are going on there to talk about the amazingness that you do, and the value, but in the way of providing the value and talking about things in a natural, organic way, right? At the end, the host is going to say to you, how can people find out more about you? How can we learn more about you? That's going to be your one point where you're going to give them some kind of call to action there, but you're not spending this hour, half an hour, or whatever, just talking about your service, right? Or just talking about whatever. Who would want to listen to that? You know what I mean? Like, no one's going to want to listen to that. So I love that you said that. The last don't I'm going to have before I get into a couple do's is, don't get stressed if you're an introvert. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people are listening to this right now and they're like, there's no way that I'm going to go on someone else's podcast. I'm an introvert. That does not make me comfortable. I don't want to be talking to all these people, etc. And I'm here to tell you that most of my clients are introverts. Okay. I am a stone cold extrovert. Okay. I love to talk to the people. I get all my energy from other people. That is how I roll. Hard Enneagram 7. But most of my clients, like I said, are introverts. And the reason they do so well on podcasts is they thrive in one-on-one conversations, which is exactly what every podcast interview is. It just happens to be recorded. Okay. But introverts, they know how to go deep and to get authentic quickly. They know how to have a real authentic one-on-one conversation with someone. And that is what does so well on podcasts. Just as a reminder, like right now with Audie, I'm just talking to Audie. There isn't anyone else here listening to us. It's just that y'all are going to listen to this later on. Okay.
That's very true.
So I
So
think
true.
that's a good thing. Don't get hung up if you feel like this isn't for me because I'm not someone that likes to get on stage. Great. This is a really great way to do your marketing then if you feel more comfortable in having a conversation with someone.
Right. And also I would say that another don't is don't expect it to be perfect. There is no perfection. Just talk, be yourself and try it out. I mean, the first podcasts I recorded, I mean, when I, as the host, the camera froze. It was just frozen. So I'm like, you know what? And that is, again, I just a shout out to Rise 25 and especially Dr. Jeremy Wise, who is one of the partner. I mean, he's a co-founder, and John and Jeremy are the co-founders. And he's just recorded and sent it out. He would not let me re-record it, just send it out because it doesn't really matter. It matters, but it doesn't really matter. But people want to listen to this conversation when it's authentic, when it's happening.
Exactly.
So don't sweat over it. So good. So those are the don'ts. Let's go over the
do's. Those are the don'ts. Couple do's that I wrote down here when you asked me that, because I want to make sure I didn't forget them. One of the biggest do's, and you kind of mentioned this before about turning things into a newsletter, but do turn the podcast you are on into content. A lot of people miss on this. This is one thing we actually do for some of our annual clients, like as part of the work we do for them, because so many people don't. And it is truly one of my biggest pet peeves, because there is every interview you do could be turning into 5 to 10 pieces of content. Like, I am not joking. You go on some interviews, and you have content for your next month, 2 months, 3 months, just from this format. So even if you've already been on a podcast and you maybe didn't do anything with it, fine. You can still be chopping that up into clips that you can be putting on social media. You can still be doing a blog post. You can still be sending out an e-newsletter that maybe rounds up a couple of podcast interviews that you do, even if they aired 6 months ago, 9 months ago, whatever. I just think that this is a huge miss for a lot of people. They kind of do the interview and then they're like, oh, that's done. I don't need to worry about that anymore. And I'm like, no, there's so much you can be doing with this. Right. And I mean, man, when we have clients that really get into a system with turning their interviews into regular content, they see big things happen in their business. They might put a clip from an interview that they did 3 months back on LinkedIn, and they are consistently putting stuff on there. And that's when someone reaches out to them. Right?
Absolutely. No, I love it. I love it. I mean, I like it when my guests go, oh, why don't you send me the raw footage? Because my marketing team is going to take it and break it and put it. I mean, I love it. That's great. That's exactly what we want.
Mm-hmm. Christina, and I want to say, though, there are a lot of AI tools out there if you don't have a marketing team. And the reason that I say that is I don't want you to get that's wonderful. If you have a marketing team that can take the raw footage and do that, 100%. But also there's tools like Headliner. There's other tools out there that you can be using yourself to do that work pretty quickly. That's also one of the greatest things that I think Chat GPT or things like that are to use, is you drop that transcript in there, baby, and you say, pick out what are the 5 biggest things that I said that I can be turning into some quote cards on Canva, right? There are a lot of different ways to be doing that quickly and effectively. So please know that it's not too late if you've already done it. So that is a big do for me, I think, is turning it into content. The other thing that I would say to definitely do is be consistent. Be consistent. A lot of people, I might, not a lot of people, but I'm speaking at an event. I was just teaching at an event a couple weeks ago in Vegas. And afterwards, someone comes up to me and they're like, I've been on a podcast and it didn't really do a whole lot for me. And I'm like, well, okay, how many podcasts have you been on? And they're like, I don't know, like 2 or 3. And I'm sorry, I laugh in this moment because 2 or 3 isn't really going to move the needle a whole lot for you. This is work that you need to be doing consistently. This is stuff that you need to be showing up in front of new audiences over and over and over again. Now, it depends obviously on a lot of different factors, but with our annual clients, our goal is to get them on at least 24 podcasts a year. And that is what my own personal goal is as well. That's an average of 2 a month, right? An average. There may be more than that. You're doing 1 month, you may take a month or 2 off, right? It all kind of depends. But that is where I have found to be like a great sweet spot for momentum really moving forward in your business from being a guest on podcasts regularly.
Absolutely. So Christina, on that point, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
What are some of the best practices to actually get on other people's podcasts? Like, let's say, of course, using you would be a great solution.
Well, sure. I wasn't gonna say that.
No, I know that
because
we talked about that. But let's say that's funny. But let's say our listeners are listening right now and going, you know what? I want to start somewhere. I want to get on somebody's podcast. What would you tell them?
The great thing about podcast guesting is you can absolutely be, particularly at the beginning, booking yourself on some shows. Okay. And this is the beautiful thing about publicity in general is you don't pay to be a guest on someone's podcast. I didn't pay Adi to come on the show, right? I didn't pay to do this other stuff. So there are a lot of opportunities out there for you to be getting on shows and kind of seeing what you think. Do I like this format, etc. One of the first things that I would say for anyone that's like just getting started in this world is see what shows your friends have, your cohort in your mastermind. You definitely have people in your network that have podcasts, right? And so I would start there. I would start with your own network. I have had people that send out a note to their email list, right? And they're like, if you have a podcast, I'm interested in being on it. Let me know, etc. I also like to, and I myself even do this a couple times a year. I put something on my stories that's like, what shows are you listening to right now? Like what podcasts? And I just get the responses from people and see if there's anything in there that I don't know about, right? Is there a show that I've never heard about? Is there something that would be a really good fit for me? Now, a lot of my followers know that I love true crime. So I also get a lot of true crime podcasts thrown in there, which obviously if suddenly I'm pitching clients to true crime podcasts, something has gone horribly awry. But it's interesting to see, kind of the different things that are out there because there's so many shows. There's no way that even, those of us that work in this day in and day out are going to know every show that's out there.
Absolutely. I think it's a great advice. Get started somewhere. See, it's good. It's better to start when you're comfortable. You don't have to have a speaker sheet. You can build all of it as you are building, but start by reaching out, like a show that, and also being honest in terms of like, there's a show you like and you feel like you can contribute right to that show. It's like the majority of them, like on my website, there is suggest a guest, link. So you can always suggest yourself as an example, but pick a show that you like and don't think that you're not worthy of it or they're not
100%.
interesting. Just like something obviously within your expertise and try it out.
I think one caveat I would just say to that is don't get hung up on only being on the biggest shows. And I think that this is a really, really important thing for a lot of people to hear because I will have people get on calls with me. It's actually one of the biggest red flags when someone gets on a call with me and they're like, I don't know, maybe I should just be on like Joe Rogan. Like, could you just get me on like Joe Rogan? Or I'm like, you haven't even been on a podcast. Like also, Joe Rogan isn't even the audience that you want. It's just that that he's a big podcaster.
You have to just pick the audience that you want.
So I want you to, when you're doing this, like I also want you to realize that you absolutely should have goal podcasts that you want to work towards that if they are the right audience for you. A lot of people are like, I want to be on Mel Robbins. I want to be on Amy Porterfield. I want to be on Pat Flynn, right? If you're like in the entrepreneurship world, that wouldn't be what I would say you should be pitching right out the gate. To your point, it's look for shows that, feel realistic. They feel like they're in your realm. They have the audience that you want to get in front of. My clients, I'll tell you this, we've gotten our clients on some big shows. Great. That's wonderful for proximity to power, a lot of great things there. Not bagging on that at all, but they make way more money by going on smaller podcasts, getting in front of these niched audiences that are very dedicated to that host and that show and et cetera. Those turn into discovery calls, which turn into clients. So,
yeah, you know what, Christina, it's also, what I found is that it's a great way of networking. So you are actually also building that relationship with the host and the guest. For right now, like you and I now met through it. I mean, this is our audiences are listening to this. They're learning about you, they're learning about me, but I'm learning about you. So when next time when I'm working with a client, let's say we're documenting their marketing processes, it's a question, well, do you go on podcast? Well, no, how am I going to get myself to do that? Well, let me make an introduction to Christina.
Right.
So that is an angle that needs to be looked at, because as you were talking, I was thinking, absolutely, make a list of all of your, just like you do anything in marketing, like who is your sphere of influence? Who are your center of influence? Who are the people that you will reach out to that will refer business to you? Well, first of any of them have a podcast? Has to be on their podcast, because that is a support for them, because you can increase the value of the podcast, but you also tighten those relationships. So I think that is also an avenue. I want to ask you about this one, is because when I go on a podcast, it's for thought leadership. I mean, of course, we all want clients, but I think having that mindset that I'm going to get on a podcast so I can get a client, just like anything in networking, just doesn't work, because you can have that, but it's the expectations of it, because really the expectations is have a great experience, share your knowledge, clients will come because of that. But don't get disappointed if you go on somebody's podcast and nobody called you after that. I mean, I just don't have that mindset. And when it happens, it's great, but you have to know where it is in your marketing cycle. This is like, here you're building your credibility, you are building the relationships, you are networking, you are putting yourself out there. But first of all, have that mindset, you're going to go out there and people are going to know about you. And then it will follow in terms of the clients, so I'm not saying clients are not going to come because of that, but I think it's just adding to that, like, don't get stressed out about the podcast. Don't get desperate about, oh, I'm getting on every podcast and I'm going to get clients from that, because that, for me, it doesn't, that's my viewpoint on it. Just go and have fun and show yourself like who you are. What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on what your goal is, right? Like when you're doing this, and if you are just doing this and getting started, and don't have an agency or something like that behind you, I think it's great to have a mindset of like, I'm just doing this more from a networking perspective to get some content, et cetera. But absolutely, like at a certain point, we are trying to think about what are going to be the topics that are going to bring clients into you, right? What are the things that you can provide value that's going to pique someone's interest to where they're going to be like, oh, that's an interesting thing that they're talking about. I should see if I can hop on a discovery call with them, or I'm going to see if I could reach out to them. But the beautiful thing about when people come to you in that authentic way, you are sharing value. We're just doing it in a way that's like really designed to really get someone's attention and something that they're going to want to know more about or learn more about you, right? That is where, our clients do see real momentum. But to your point, it's not going to be every podcast they're on. It's not going to be everything. That's why we have so many throughout the year.
That's why you have to have abundance, right? I guess the point is not, of course, you have to be intentional in what you say, and you have to do it in such a way that people will go, oh yeah, I want to work with Christine because she knows what she's talking about. Absolutely. But it's not like you're sitting here like, oh my gosh, I have to get a client, or it wasn't worth my time, right? Or I'm here and I'm gonna like sell no, it's not. It is, that's why I'm saying, where is it in the cycle of the promotion part? This is for establishing yourself as the expert in the area, and those that see that, they will contact you from there. Or they will forward it to somebody else. Hey, I heard that you are looking at being on a podcast. Why don't you listen to this episode? This talks about that. So that's also creates that viral, information that is out there, because people also search nowadays, like in terms of like it can come up on the AI search engines, right? Because people say, well, okay, well, ChatGPT, tell me how can I be a guest on a podcast? Boom, you should listen to this expert in this podcast on how to do that, because it does come up, it quotes it. So I think there is so many ways. It's just that it has to be looked at the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish. Good. Well, Christine, now the $1 million question, if people want to work with you, and they should, because it is, you have to have a dedicated, I can tell you from my experience, I have a great marketing team, and you're right. If you don't have it, you have to use the tools that you can find out there. Depends on the size of your business. But having a team behind me allows me to be over 100 episodes as a guest and and about 500 episodes as a host, with running the business and having a lot of activities that I do. I write articles for Forbes, for Inc. magazine. I'm on stages next week. I'm going to be in 2 conferences where I'm a speaker. So you do have to have a team. You don't have to hire them internally. You can use an outsourced team like yours that has the expertise and get you on the right podcast, so you can start utilizing that tool. So if our listeners would like to do that and reach out to you, how would they do that?
The best way to kind of find out, like if you're trying to decide, do I kind of want to do this myself, or do I want to have an agency that kind of takes this on for me, like you said, is to head to podcastpublicityquiz.com. And we have a really fun interactive quiz there that will kind of put you on the path that maybe makes the most sense for you in your business and where you're kind of at right now. You can also always find me on LinkedIn, Christina Lenkowski. There ain't another one. I'm the only Christina Lenkowski, so I promise you're not gonna run into another. And then on Instagram as well. I love when people hear me on podcasts and they reach out to me on Instagram. That is like one of my favorite things. It'll make like my whole day. So those are all great places to get in front of us. And like you said, I think there just comes a point in everyone's business, and I've been there, you've been there, et cetera, where you realize I do need to bring in experts that know exactly what it is they're doing, so that it frees me up to do what I need to be doing in my business. And that's where, most of our clients sit at as well. They know this is important. They know they need to be getting out there, but they don't have the bandwidth, and their team doesn't have the knowledge or the relationships to know how to do this themselves.
That's exactly right, because you have the relationships. That's what you do for a living. So if I want to be on such and such podcast, you would probably know such and such podcast, and they already know you. So they're not going to send your email to spam, and they're probably going to, I'm sure that now, when we get off this episode, I will say, Christina, those are the guests I'm looking for. And then you are going to be, and then in the future, when Joey, my marketing director, she sees emails from your team, she knows that you vetted them and that they are serious, and that, they align with the type of guests that I want. So of course we're going to say yes. Of course we have our own vetting process, but we will be more likely to do that because we also want our lives to be easier. Like, I'm sure Joy wants her, instead of her starting vetting and finding guests, if you give it to us, it was like, yeah, of course, we'll have this one and this one. When this one doesn't align with our brand, but that's okay. So that's why it works.
That's awesome. That's exactly it. It doesn't necessarily, our relationships don't necessarily guarantee a yes on a show that we have a relationship with, but they absolutely get us further ahead in the vetting process, in the pile, et cetera. And that's why I'm out here all the time, meeting all these hosts and doing all the hosts and producers and all this stuff, so that our clients have the benefit of that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Christina, it's been a pleasure having you on this podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
Great conversation. You're very welcome. And, who knows, we might do a second round here to ask more questions and get more answers.
I love it. Thank you, Adi.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.